there any relevance of native speaker norms? That's a question for TEFLologists. Is it better to focus on form or to focus on forms? That's a question for TEFLologists. If you use a textbook, is your classroom authentic, or should your approach be more learner-centric? From feedback to learner autonomy, we'll discuss it all on TEFLology.
Hi, I'm Matthew.
I'm Rob.
And I'm Matt.
And welcome back to the TEFLology Podcast, a podcast all about teaching English as a foreign language and related matters, presented by 3 self-certified TEFLologists.
TEFL News.
This week's TEFL News is a article I read in The Guardian referring to a new policy by the Oxford English Dictionary. So basically, they want to include more regional words from around the world in the next edition.
Right.
Presumably, I'm not sure exactly how they define regional and how they define. Presumably, they're going to talk about regional English words. But if that's from around the world, that might be slightly problematic.
Sure. Well, I mean, different World English varieties, I'd guess.
Yeah, I wonder, like how inclusive they're going to be. But the article doesn't reference that, but just something of interest. So first of all, what do you think about this idea? Do you think it's a good idea to include... some of these are, I mean, we'll look at some examples, but some of these are pretty specific.
Yeah. I think it's good. The more the merrier.
Okay.
Basically.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder what the role of a dictionary should be to only include like words that are really commonly used, right? Maybe not.
It depends on the dictionary. Like a learner's dictionary includes the very common ones. The OED includes like ridiculous ones from 1523.
So we've talked about this before, but what are the rules for words going into the dictionary? Like, can you remember what we talked about before?
Yeah, I think you need a citation, which is basically like a written record of the word. But I wonder if that still holds true. I wonder if like because there's so much recordings of spoken English or languages. I wonder if that would count as well.
And also, there's so much writing that you could probably discount most of it.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, like people on blogs just make up words that only get one use. I don't think one use is going to count as a word.
That's true.
Right?
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point. Like all the blogging and Twitter and all that stuff must throw their usual citation procedures out of whack.
So I think for this, I wonder if there should be some like relevance. It should have some sort of relevance of use, maybe.
You mean like relevance to the wider culture, or?
Yeah, but like a wider relevance, I guess. Yeah, maybe.
So if it's picked up in general parlance, if it is used, maybe a criteria would be something like if it's used in a news story, when the news story isn't about that being a new word. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's used not as a curiosity, but it's just used as a regular piece of discourse.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, dictionaries are kind of notorious for getting it wrong in terms of picking they select their 10 new words or whatever for the year, and often they've been technology related, but they often tend to choose the wrong words, the words that don't end up sticking around.
You don't use "oh no second" regularly?
No, not anymore. Yeah,
okay, not anymore. You ever did?
I got caught up in the whole fever, but it's a big
"oh no second" fever.
Yeah. So this maybe came about from a collaboration last year. We may have talked about this. I'm not sure. But the OED, the BBC, and something called the Forward Arts Foundation was looking for local English words to kind of maybe to start this project. And so they had things like, I'm not going to say it because I don't think I can, but
Bagum.
Yeah? Is that yeah? Okay.
You do that better than me, I think. Yeah.
Which means?
It's like
golly gee.
Gosh.
And so this came out of that project, as did Cuddy Wifter, which is from your neck of the woods.
Is it Cuddy Wifter?
Yeah.
It's not one I'm familiar with.
Well, not exactly your neck of the woods, but it's from the northeast apparently.
That's not my neck.
Where you've spent time.
Yeah. Okay. What does it mean then?
It's a left-handed person.
Okay. Oh, they don't. There was a cull of those in the northeast, so I never ran into any.
Fair enough. Okay, so as you can imagine, they're asking the public for help with this, which I guess has advantages and disadvantages. What do you think some of those might be?
People just making up words. People making up words that are coded insults against their friends.
Against the OED.
Are they? I mean, I wonder how they're presenting this in the dictionary. Like, are they having this as a standalone word, or are they having it as like, here's this like a left-handed person, and then here's some regional varieties of that word.
Yeah.
Rather than as a standalone kind of.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I guess if the idea of a dictionary, I suppose, would be like if you were to find this word, you'd want to go to the dictionary and look it up. So it would have to have its.
But then it could just say like kitty woofter or whatever it was. C.
Left-handed
person. Yeah,
I guess it could. But I guess already, I don't know how far it goes. Dictionaries. The last time I looked at a dictionary, which is a long time ago, probably. Some dictionaries will reference is it American English, British English, Australian English, Indian English. I'm not sure what other varieties traditionally have been. Yeah. In dictionaries. Like I think at what point would you? I guess they like sushi. They would probably say of Japanese origin or something like that. But here would they say Middlesbrough English and New Jersey English and I wonder.
I guess this won't be in like the the random. This will be like the online, where they've got space to put everything. So I don't see why they wouldn't do that. Well, what are some words from your particular dialects? I don't think you've got a particular dialect, right? You've got like a million little dialects.
Sure.
But are there any specific words from your dialects that you think would go in this?
I don't know. Like I saw written down in a newspaper article recently that Pompey, Portsmouth, where I'm from. The Pompey dialect is a thing. I don't know what it is though. I don't know. I've got no. Maybe I use it without knowing. I've never. I want to find some stuff about it, but it was.
Did you know that stuff is actually a word that only you use? I've never.
Yeah. You taught that to us.
Yeah. I don't know. But there is. There certainly is. But
the only example I can think of is, and it's one of those things that you don't find out till later that other people don't use it, which is. The part of New York where I spent a lot of my childhood, so it's pretty regional. So it's probably not all of Westchester County, which is the first county north of New York City, and that's where I kind of grew up. So we call like a long sandwich, a soft sandwich with meatballs or chicken or peppers or whatever inside it. We call it a wedge.
Okay.
So you call it like I'll have a meatball wedge or a sausage and peppers wedge. But you go into New York City, which is half an hour away or less, depending on where you are, and they have no idea what a wedge is.
Right.
And as far as I know, it's the only place in the country that uses that terminology for a sandwich.
You say they have no idea. So this is where this kind of comes back in, this whole thing. Like, they have no idea, but do you think that this is more about choice, like extending choice? So they say, we don't call it that here, but we're aware of what that means. So do you think that this is the reason why they're doing this? Kind of?
I imagine the reason they're doing this is, well, there's probably a few. I mean, the cynical thing is, it gets them in the Guardian doing this kind of project. But I think also, you could easily argue, it's to preserve these words. I guess these kind of words are maybe more at risk of dying out than more standard words. And also, occasionally it does happen that, a very specific regional slang term, I think, I can't come up with any examples right now, but may go viral. And
stuff, for example.
Spread out of Portsmouth.
Very useful words. How have I used that word? Can you give me an example?
Yeah, we would say things.
Yeah.
But you tend to, this kind of, I guess it's a collective now.
Stuff.
Still not sure the spelling.
I know there was a film in the 80s called The Stuff. Is that what it came from?
Yeah.
What?
There's that film, The Right Things.
Yeah.
I was in Blockbuster in Portsmouth, and I was amazed.
Yeah. Give me an example. Give me in a sentence.
Well, no, you have to tell us how to use the word. It's your word.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how I use it. Stuff. Just doing.
Would you use it as a verb as well?
Just doing different stuff. I'm up to some stuff at the moment.
Stuff off.
I'm up to
get
stuffed.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to hear some examples that the OED has already found?
Say that again. That seems a bit random. Yeah.
Okay, so would you like to hear some examples of words? As you can imagine, this article is full of examples.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, hamajang.
Hamajang.
Yep.
Is it a sort of hammer?
No, this is a Hawaiian word, apparently.
Type of clothing?
No, it's kind of what it sounds like, I guess. In a disorderly or shambolic state.
Oh, okay.
Munted.
Does that mean drunk?
Broken or wrecked, so it could
Okay.
also mean.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard something like
Okay.
that.
Where's
There's
that?
The word munter would come from that, right?
I wonder. This is from New Zealand, apparently.
Oh, okay.
But it could be.
Munter.
Yeah.
What's a munter, Rob?
Yeah.
I'm looking at one.
Fair enough.
What is a munter?
It's like an ugly person, isn't it?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Matt.
Brick in New Jersey apparently means very cold.
Mm-hmm.
Round the Wrekin, or Reckon.
Well, a wreck, like a park.
I don't know. This looks like a place name.
Wrekin.
Capital WREKIN.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wrecking crew.
Up the wreck. We used to go up the wreck.
Yeah.
So,
What did that
Before
mean?
they made it an offence.
like a park. Like a park.
Like a recreational.
Recreational, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so apparently, round the Wrekin means in a lengthy or roundabout manner,
Mm-hmm.
which is in the Midlands.
In the Midlands. Right?
Mm.
Okay. The Midlands of England.
The
Britain.
Midlands with a capital M.
Okay.
These all seem to be like predominantly what's the word? Like New Zealand.
Yeah.
Centre.
The Midlands.
Centre nations.
The Midlands.
Yeah. Are there any from like other parts of the English-speaking world?
So actually, no. Maybe that answers our earlier question. So, according to this article, they don't have any from outside. Well, all their examples are basically U.S., UK, or New Zealand.
Mm.
So presumably, I don't know if they are looking for words from.
They should probably be, because my students when I taught about world Englishes, that was the thing that they really liked, that they took away most from the class. I think was all these new words from like Indian English and stuff that they could go and try out and play around with, and it was nice and appropriate culturally.
Yep.
It was good.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess that is this episode's TEFL news. The Oxford English Dictionary's hunt for regional words around the world.
TEFL cultures.
Okay, for this week's TEFL culture, I'd like to have a discussion, or lead a discussion, about SEN in ELT. For those who are not in the know, SEN means...
Special educational needs?
Yeah, special educational needs, that's right. So a couple of reasons why I want to talk about this. Firstly, we haven't had a section where we dedicate a whole bit to SEN. I think, Rob, you've talked about teaching your blind learner in the past.
Yes.
I think I may have talked briefly about a deaf learner that I once taught.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this section is worthy of a whole section in itself.
Yeah.
Another reason is I'm working on a project that Rob's involved with, and I want some ideas, basically.
Okay.
So that's another reason. And there's a third reason as well. I think it's an issue that warrants more discussion, as hopefully we'll show as we go on. Mm-hmm. But first of all, I've got 5 questions I want to ask. So we'll discuss each one in turn. The first one is, what's your understanding of SEN, perhaps in relation to the field and to practice? So Rob first.
Well, as you know, I've written about this in a few places. So my understanding of SEN would be that it's about... it describes students who require some kind of support above what would be required for other members of the class. And it would cover a variety of different needs. So it might be like physical disabilities, it might be developmental disorders, it might be behavioural problems ADHD or whatever. And all of those things could fall under the umbrella of SEN, I think.
Yeah.
Matt, how about you?
I agree with that. In where I work, we have an issue, which is that we have what we call official, we call them SNS, official special needs students, and then we also keep a record of what we call unofficial special needs students. And official just means that the student themselves have self-identified as having special needs. But yeah, as Rob said, there's the 2 types: there's physical disabilities and that what the terminology we use is developmental disorders or developmental disabilities,
Right.
which would be things like ADHD, ASD, dyslexia, those sort of issues. But yeah, things that maybe, I mean, obviously there's that big gray area. Maybe we'll get into that, but you know, maybe all learners need some kind of individual accommodation.
Yeah.
So it's really a question of the extent of that accommodation.
So what I've got written here, this is a quote from Delaney. I think this book was published in 2016. So it broadly refers to students who have a significantly greater difficulty in learning than the majority of students in the similar peer group.
Yeah.
And who require some special educational provisions. So that word provisions. And yeah, like Rob said, SEN encompasses different categories such as cognition and learning needs, communication and interaction needs, difficulties, and that could be social, emotional, or behavioural difficulties, and also sensory and medical impairments as well. So this is the range of SEN differences, I guess.
Yeah. So, and that's interesting though. The first part, the initial part of the definition talked about students who have a significantly greater difficulty in learning.
Yeah.
And so I guess the implication there is, for example, a deaf student or a blind student, that impairment is going to cause a significant difficulty in their learning without some kind of accommodation.
Yeah.
I guess so. I mean, without some kind of accommodation, that's the key point, I think. Yeah. If you were to put that person into a class with students who don't have that issue, then, you know, they're probably going to struggle more than other students at the same level.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess it would depend on the type of the course, and you know, for a purely speaking class, you know, maybe certain SEN students would not be considered to be SEN in that context.
Yeah. So it's interesting you picked out on that word difficulty. Yeah. Like that seems to assume that that word difficulty has negative connotations, right?
Yeah.
So some other people have written about this using the term specific learning differences, which doesn't apply positive or negative. It just applies that they have a different way of approaching things.
Yeah. When I submitted a paper to the LTED journal at Warwick, one of the comments I got back was that it seemed like I was framing the issue as, you know, as a problem to be solved, as opposed to a difference to be explored or celebrated.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So I think that they're the kind of ways that we kind of approach SEN learners. I've also seen D added to SEN, so SEND.
Okay.
I'm not sure what that last D...
Special educational needs or...
Differences,
difficulties,
maybe.
I'd have thought differences or something.
Yeah. So I think we all have a similar understanding. So what's your experiences with working with SEN learners? Now, Rob, you've got some practical experiences. Can you briefly... We actually did talk about this in episode 29, and that was 3 years ago. We talked about that almost to the day. You talked about your blind students, so could you remind us of what you did?
I had a blind student in my class. I'd never taught a student with any kind of disability before. And it was kind of a process of learning about that student and about how to support that student and how to not over-support the student as well, and so on. And I came up with like a few sort of strategies which seemed to work, and the main thing that I learned from that, I think, was talk to your student, figure out what they need, like they're the expert, and if people are interested, they can read my article, which is in English Teaching Professional, issue 99, pages 13 to 15.
We'll probably direct people to that. Matt, how about you? So Matt, you come from a sort of a management perspective, so what's your...
I guess most of my experiences may be kind of coordinating or like overseeing the application of a framework for accommodating special needs students, so kind of liaising between teachers who are teaching the students and the administration of the university, including the SDSO, the Student with Disability Support Office.
Right.
So it includes stages placing students in classes with teachers who we think are maybe better able to accommodate those students, and that comes down to experience in teaching, occasionally languages that they
Yeah,
know. Like if they share an L1 with the student, that may be a factor. Sometimes gender is a factor if students make special requests. And I also have some experience teaching those students. I taught the same one of the same SEN students that you had.
Oh yes,
with
yeah.
Kind of severe social anxiety.
Yeah.
And ASD.
Yeah, of course.
And also experience teaching students with hearing difficulties and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I've had one experience that Matt mentioned. I've also taught a couple of other, and am teaching now currently a deaf learner again. And the main thing that underlies all of this is I don't think any of us have any. When we started, would you say that your know-how or expertise was good enough?
No.
Yeah. So why do you think that is?
Because I didn't have any.
But why?
No training covers it because
why not though? Yeah. So
I wouldn't say no training. I think there's some teachers who come into ELT from a regular teaching background where they probably have done some of that. I think it's included as part of like most general teaching licenses, like in the UK or so on. But ELT training, like a CELTA, it's a 1 month course. They can only include so much, and their goal is to get you up and in front of a class and be able to do anything. The Delta or whatever equivalent, again, they don't really have much time to go into it. And I think in MA courses, it's more common, but this has to be something that you seek out because it's something that you really want to focus on, I think. And apart from that, I mean, what can people do? Well, there isn't really much in the way of training because I think people don't see this as a major issue,
It's interesting. When I looked at the numbers recently, and the percentage of the students in my program who are officially identified as special needs students is 0.5%, and that's out of over 4,500 students.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very small number of students.
Yeah.
Which is perhaps why, and I'm not saying it's justifiable at all. I don't think it is, but is maybe perhaps why we get to a point where so many of us language teachers don't have any training in dealing with them.
Yeah. What I'm wondering is, do you think that there's enough students for this to become more of a focus within the field, or do you think it should be looked at in terms of inclusivity, more wider sort of inclusivity things? Because that seems to be a growing thing recently, a bit thinking about well-being, thinking about emotions. Do you think that this falls under that wider umbrella? Or?
Well, I mean, I think it would have to some extent, but I don't know if that on its own is enough.
Yeah.
Because there are certain skills that you would need to know and to develop in order to support certain students, right? And that's not going to that requires specific training or specific development or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think personally that it should be made, maybe not part of necessarily ELT training, although that would be good, but it should be part of professional development programs, which is what I've argued for before.
Yeah. Without being in any way specific and not talking about any particular teaching context I've worked in, but I have in the past I've worked with teachers that I know have expressed expressed how can I put this? Basically not wanting, feeling that having a special needs student in their class is a burden, an extra burden, and maybe a sense of unfairness, like why is this is extra work for me having this student in the class. And I really think it's part of the problem. Basically, it's part of like a wider, maybe societal problem that students with special needs are being, and maybe it's part of special needs indicates that there is some kind of special accommodation that needs to take place, but it's that if I think any attitude other than let's do what we can to accommodate them and give them the same experience that all students have is problematic, I think.
And also that to me, the way that's framed, it seems to shut the student themselves out of the discussion.
Well, that's exactly, that's why I think it is problematic. And maybe if students aren't, even if they're not directly told, you might be a burden, or some teachers don't want to teach you, I think that kind of feeling maybe eventually does filter down. They do get it.
So there's a couple of things that I think, so I'm not one of those people. I've kind of actively seeked out, because Because I think what it does is first and foremost, it's an area that not a lot of people have documented or talked about. So I think like Rob, I think it's a good thing to get out there and tell your story.
Yeah.
But also, what it's taught me is like how much we take things for granted in the classroom. Like when you have a deaf student in the class, you need to completely rethink about how you go about doing stuff. So like the other day, I wrote on, because I write stuff on my PowerPoint, I wrote what could you hear from the listening to the whole class, and obviously there's a better way to say that. Yeah. Like what can you remember from the listening? That's the same thing. So so just little things like that you take for granted that you need to reconsider. So I think it's a good exercise in professional development. Yep. But it shouldn't be about me on the same. It's not about me at the end of the day. It's really about helping the learner.
No, but it's part of. But making it a part of professional development is maybe part of making a wider change.
Yeah.
In terms of like Rob was saying, making it something that should be part of every professional development.
Yeah. One thing I found was I used to go after the lesson with my blind student. I used to go to the room, like the shared room that I was teaching with, and I'd tell all the other teachers about what I'd been doing that day because I was kind of excited about it. You know, it was interesting for me. I was learning something new. And I remember one day I went in and that student had been absent, and someone said, "Oh, how was your student?" I said, "Oh, that student wasn't there today." And another teacher said really sarcastically, "Oh, you're going to have to find something else to talk about." Which I was like, it's a very nice attitude.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, just to quickly sort of end this section. So what is the future for this? Like I've kind of written down that it's probably best that we tell individual stories because this is such an individualized thing. Yeah. Like Rob said earlier, we should be involving the student. And I thought that some sort of exploratory practice way of framing it would be good. Like saying to the student, look, I want to learn how to help you better. And it needs to be a back and forth of what's working. To an extent, you might not be able to do it with all students, depending on difficulty and differences.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how often, because I work closely with the teachers who do have to, often accommodate students. I think a lot of if it's their first time having a blind student or a deaf student, they over prepare and they're maybe a little bit nervous about what's going to happen, forgetting that this student has spent their whole life in classrooms in exactly such situations, and they're going to know what to do, and so they always come out of it after the first lesson saying, "Oh, it was fine. It was so much easier than I thought." And telling those kind of stories is good.
And I think also more formally, like I know this is something that you've been working on. It's something that I wrote about as well. Is trying to sort of establish structures that you can follow, like the professional development structures where so my idea was first you talk to the student, get the student's perspective, and then you can do your own kind of professional development in various ways, and then you can filter that down to other teachers. You can share your knowledge, telling stories, as you say. It doesn't take a lot, like the people who you were talking about, Matt, who were sort of talking about it as if it was a burden or a problem. It actually doesn't require very much, I think, in order to make these changes, which have a big difference.
Yeah, I mean the changes should be small, right? It should be to raise their equitable. It should be to maintain an equitable learning environment, not to make them stand out.
Yeah, you don't want to single them out.
It's very small.
Well, that's the big challenge, I think, is like I said before, just making sure that they have as close as possible to the same experience as the other students. Yeah. But
But of course, no student has the same experience.
Of course, yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true.
And finally, I think like maybe more of this on sort of pre-service courses, perhaps to some extent. I don't know if that's possible.
And in service.
Yeah.
I think in service there's more opportunity, at least in ELT.
Yep. Yeah. And I think we should maybe just finally address one thing, which is I think we've been called out even for the podcast about we're not necessarily available to hearing impaired listeners.
We were talking about that.
So obviously we would like to provide written transcripts of the podcast and of the interviews. Matt, you recently discovered that YouTube actually has a pretty good feature for that.
Yeah, you can, like, all of our podcasts on YouTube are, you can hit the what's it called, the closed captions.
Yeah.
And they're pretty good, actually. They're not 100% correct, but they get the main ideas of what we're saying with all our regional accents. Yes, so do check that out if you're interested.
TEFL Pioneers.
This episode's TEFL pioneer is Thomas M Paikeday. I think that's how you pronounce that. It's got an E in the middle. Paikeday or Paikeday?
Yeah.
What do you say?
No idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, Paikeday, I'd say.
I'd have said Paikeday, yeah. So he's a Canadian lexicographer born on October 11th, 1926 in, I'm going to have a run-up at this, Barananganam in India.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, he's still alive at 91 years old,
Wow.
so one of our few living pioneers. And through his career, he worked mostly as a dictionary editor and compiler.
Okay.
So he edited the User's Webster's Dictionary, the Canadian Penguin Dictionary, and he also edited the series of Winston Dictionaries of Canadian English. Aside from his work just editing dictionaries, he also pioneered the use of microcomputer technology for the collection and analysis of lexicographical data.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So he did some work on dictionaries. This is the key point.
Okay, good. Good for him.
Yeah. He also did some work on phonetics, producing a book titled Everyday Diction, and he was active in language teaching circles and attended conferences of things like the Modern Language Convention or whatever that group's called. So, you know, that's all useful and well and good, but why is he a pioneer for TEFL? And that's because of two publications that he produced in 1985. Both of them came out in 1985. The first one was an article in TESOL Quarterly called May I Kill the Native Speaker? And the second one was a book titled The Native Speaker is Dead.
All right. So somebody answered his question in the affirmative.
Well, it was him.
Oh, right.
He answered
He answered his own question.
He answered his own question.
Okay.
It was a question to himself, I think.
I see.
Yeah. So with the current sort of focus on native speakerism in ELT, it's kind of a buzzword. We've talked about it before.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be worth sort of returning to these two explorations, and particularly to the book, as kind of the sort of the first steps in this direction.
Okay.
So have you read either of these pieces yourselves?
I've heard them referenced a lot as being sort of found.
Mostly by Rob.
Yeah. I mean, like, I've heard them referenced as being kind of like foundational texts in like native speaker discourse, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, obviously the idea of the native speaker was very popular for a long time. You know, there's a book by Stephanie Hackett up there about the emergence of the English native speaker, which she traces back to the 1800s as a sort of a solid concept. And then, of course, with Chomsky, you know, the idea of the ideal speaker listener as this kind of this being with perfect competence, if not necessarily perfect performance, right? He's got that dichotomy, the split. And then in the 1980s, there was a monograph called, an edited collection called a Festschrift, Festschrift for Native Speaker by Florian Kuhlmass, which analysed some of the conceptions of the native speaker in theoretical linguistics. But I think that Paikaday's book stands out for being one of or the first book which discusses the idea of the native speaker in what we would call applied linguistics and TESOL. Yeah. So I'm going to explain a little about the structure of the book, a little about some of the arguments made in the book, and yeah, you can chime in with your thoughts. So his reasons for engaging in this project are in a blurb on the back of the book, which there's an abridged version here. The separate but equal treatment given by educators to non-native speakers of English is something that has bothered native-speaking Thomas Paikeday since 1963. Linguists such as Chomsky swear by the insights and intuitions of the native speaker, a term that has not been defined even in the unabridged Webster. You've got the dictionary influence coming in there. But the term could cut both ways when applied with bias, as was demonstrated in Houston in 1980, when discrimination against American-born instructors of foreign languages was debated at the annual meeting of the Modern Language Association. It's well known that qualified foreigners are sometimes denied jobs because they lack North American job experience. So he's obviously got very practical concerns here. So what he did was, what Paikeday did was to investigate the concept of the native speaker. And to do that, he sent a memo to a variety of linguists, including Noam Chomsky, David Crystal, Michael Halliday, William Labov, and Randolph Quirk, so some of our previous pioneers in there.
Yeah.
And he kept this correspondence with these linguists going, and eventually collated all of their responses and put them all together and turned them into a dialogue with himself as the chairperson, hosting all these replies as if it was, I mean, so it's kind of a Socratic dialogue, you know.
So it's like a fictional retelling of all these memos. And...
Well, I think all the memos are reproduced verbatim, but he's reconstructed them all in this dialogue format. Mm-hmm. So first of all, I mean, how does that sound as a structure to a book?
It could work. Empire Magazine often adopted that format. I think they interview a bunch of people about the making of a movie, but they edit it to, you know, to make it sound like a conversation between these people.
Right.
That's what it reminds me of.
Yeah. And I imagine this was quite a new thing at the time.
I think it still is, yeah.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's quite interesting. It's quite nice to read. It's a little bit confusing to read at times, but it has a very informal sort of tone. And I like the way that he kind of punctures them a little bit. He pokes at the interviewees, you know, with his post hoc comments. Right. But it's also a little bit difficult to follow at times. You know, the dialogue meanders. It goes this way and that. But you know, it's worth a read, I think, if you can get hold of the book.
So the premise of this book is that he was just kind of raising how much of a problematic term this is back then, or
well, he had some questions. These were the questions that he originally sent to his correspondents.
Right. Okay.
How do we define the native speaker? Is a native speaker made rather than born? Is the native speaker simply a convenient linguistic fiction? And can the use of the native speaker become discriminatory? I think these were sort of the main points that he was getting at. Yeah. And I think the findings of the book, I've kind of summarised these. So first of all, the difficulty of defining the native speaker. So there's kind of a back and forth, especially with Chomsky. Chomsky obviously pushing back on this quite hard. Sure. But basically Paikeday is arguing that the simplistic definitions which some of the correspondents give, such as someone who speaks a language as his or her mother tongue, isn't satisfactory when you consider, from his point of view, that you can meet people who learned English as an adult, or any language as an adult, and speak with equal proficiency to those who learned it as a child. So he kind of pushes back against that, and he also says, you know, there are plenty of people we would consider native speakers who are not, you know, they make what we would consider errors or mistakes in their speech. And Chomsky's rebuttal to that is quite nice, actually. He says it's like the word water. You know, water may have all sorts of impurities and things, but you can still refer to it as water, right? So that was kind of the first point, a discussion of that. So Paikeday seems to come down on the side that it is not really a clear definition.
Right.
Yeah. The second point is the socially constructed nature of the native speaker. So he brings up the idea of the native dishwasher, someone who not only is good at washing dishes, but who is supremely able to wash dishes due to their, you know, innate birthright. Yeah, which is kind of absurd. But I think what he's trying to say there is that when we use the term native speaker, we're implying more than simple proficiency. There are, you know, other things kind of mixed in with that definition. Okay. And yeah, that's one of the other themes that he explores.
For example, culture or...
Yeah, that kind of thing. Culture, proficiency, you know, accent, and so on. And again, there's a kind of a back and forth with his correspondence. Yeah. The next point, separate but equal treatment. So here he brings up the question again of discrimination, and he says, he asks his participants, can the distinction between native and non-native speaker, especially since it happens to favour one group of speakers of each language against all others, become discriminatory in some of its applications, such as hiring for dictionary editing or language teaching positions? So this is 1985, you know. This is, 9 years before Peter Majesh, his book, and before, you know, this kind of debate became more widely spread.
Yeah.
Yeah. And basically he says that this is an issue we should think about. And he again cites the debate at the convention he attended, where American-born instructors of foreign languages said that they were being discriminated against in favour of native speakers of those languages. So this was people in North America feeling discriminated against.
Right.
Yeah. So I think basically Paikaday's book is interesting because it presages a lot of these discussions which we're now having about discrimination, about the definitions of the native speaker. And it's maybe not the most sophisticated discussion in terms of, it being a pioneering thing, and some of Paikaday's examples are a little bit crude, but yeah, I think it's a nice starting point. And I think if you're interested in this discussion, it's good to go back and see where it all began.
Sure.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the other news story which we didn't cover this week is the 2018 Alton Awards. Sorry, British Council. But just to point out, the winner of the Innovation in Learner Resources this year is Tim's Pronunciation Workshop, which is online videos by the BBC Learning English, proudly featuring native speaker vox pops. So like this in 2018 the BBC is putting out videos proudly touting the fact that they're having these native they also say native speaker models that they use to and this is a learner resource
and that won the Innovation Award,
and that won the Innovation in Learner Resources Award.
Very innovative.
Yeah, so I mean I think it's what Paikeday started and what is continuing. I think it is moving in the right direction, but maybe more slowly than we would like.
Yeah, still a distance to go.
Yeah.
So if you are interested in reading this book, it's unfortunately out of print. It was self-published actually. So it's no longer in print, but you can get copies on Amazon. Mine cost £50, quite steep for 109 pages. But as I say, it's worth reading, and maybe you'll be able to find a PDF or something online. So that's this episode's TEFL pioneer, Thomas M Paikeday.
Thank you very much for listening.
If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can send an email to TEFLology@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, and we've got our own website. And if you'd like to support the show in some way, then please pick up our book, Podcasting and Professional Development, A Guide for English Language Teachers. So it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from me.
Goodbye.